Welcome to Philosophy in Pajamas podcasts.
So we're not starting in a library today or, some quiet academic hall.
No, not at all.
We are taking you straight into what might be the most profoundly democratic and chaotic space in India.
The crowded, loud metal benches of a rush hour Mumbai local train.
Exactly.
It sounds like a really odd setting for a high-level cultural critique, but you should stick with us.
Yeah.
Because the observations shared by Rushik about what he saw one morning, they reveal a kind of structural fault line running through modern social conversation.
They absolutely do. Look, you came here curious, wanting to cut through the noise, and our mission today is to rapidly distill the critical insights from this one specific encounter.
We need to understand how what starts as, healthy cultural critique can so quickly shift.
And shift into a form of moral policing, and what the massive social cost of that transition is on our collective ability to think freely.
What happened on that train is a perfect, compressed demonstration of how so many of us now approach tradition, ethics, and, well, debate itself.
It's a subtle but powerful move, away from nuance and towards enforced certainty.
So let's unpack this unusual classroom and see what the cost is when critical thought gives way to conformity.
Okay, let's set the stage. Rushik described a group of college students standing near the door, visibly educated, well-spoken, and just radiating that, that particular brand of loud, useful confidence.
Right.
And they were discussing these huge fundamental topics: culture, food habits, family structures, language, festivals, all of it.
And at first it must have sounded fantastic, right? Sharp opinions, articulate thoughts.
Oh, absolutely. The kind of robust exchange you hope to hear from the next generation. They were tackling important questions, like how traditions can sometimes carry baggage we need to shed.
But there's a but.
There is a but, because this is where the transition happened, and this is the crucial distinction that was noted. The conversation, it didn't stay in the realm of exploration.
It didn't ask questions.
No, it didn't ask, what are the competing goods here? Or how can this tradition be adapted?
It slid.
It absolutely slid into what you could call a prosecutorial structure. The objective wasn't understanding the context of the tradition.
It was what?
The objective was delivering a guilty verdict. Every inherited value immediately became suspect. Not worthy of exploration, just condemnation.
Okay, so give us some immediate examples that were observed. How did this prosecutorial tone actually manifest?
Well, think about the language they used. Food habits were only discussed through the lens of, say, ecological or moral violence.
Okay.
Family structures weren't analyzed for any stabilizing factors, but were immediately just labeled as control mechanisms to be dismantled.
And language.
Language was only viewed through the lens of exclusion. The really fascinating part was the utter lack of curiosity. They weren't seeking answers. They were reciting an approved conclusion.
So if we strip away the specific political content, because the topic itself doesn't really matter here, the core issue wasn't the critique itself. Right. Societies have to critique themselves to grow. The core issue was the structure of the thinking. It wasn't, how can we make this better for everyone?
It was fundamentally, you are wrong, and because you are wrong, you are also morally deficient.
That's the hinge point right there.
It is. When an idea is treated as a moral crime rather than, a testable hypothesis, the debate just shuts down instantly.
Because if you believe your position is ethically absolute.
You don't need to listen to opposing data. You just need to correct the person who voiced it.
And that attitude had immediate, visible consequences for the people around them. Let's look at the first person who dared to interject, the elderly man.
Oh, this part was just heartbreaking. The man was quiet, he was smiling, and he gently tried to add some context.
He wasn't even arguing against them.
No, not at all. He was just adding nuance. He spoke about how festivals, even with their flaws, often brought neighbors together across class lines, and how customs gave the chaos of city life a necessary, predictable rhythm. He spoke apologetically, almost like he could sense the intellectual hostility in the air.
And did the students pause? Did they acknowledge the historical or social context he offered? Did we get that, respectful intergenerational debate we all hope to see?
Not even close. They immediately corrected him. They dismissed his entire testimony, not by analyzing the social impact of festivals,
but by analyzing him.
Exactly. They stated that his nostalgia was dangerous, that his memories were simply conditioning and internalized oppression.
Wait, so they didn't counter his point about rhythm and community. They just dismissed the person making the point.
Precisely. And they laughed. Not viciously, but casually. Like he'd made an obvious factual error, like saying the train was going in the wrong direction.
And the result?
The result was immediate and profound. You could see it on the man's face. He just stopped, mid-sentence. His whole expression changed. He looked away, focusing on the cityscape rushing past, while his personal history, his roots, his lived experience, all of it was just quietly invalidated by a casual laugh.
And this is the core mechanism of cultural erosion that Rushik highlights. It doesn't happen through some, forced political decree.
Yeah.
It happens through shame, through the subtle moral superiority. When your entire life is dismissed as dangerous conditioning, you stop trying to explain it.
Silence becomes the easiest path. It's survival.
And that cost of pushing back became even clearer with the second incident.
The young boy.
Yeah, the much younger person who tried to join in.
This was the boy, maybe still in his school uniform, who just jumped in and tried to challenge the consensus. And he was clumsy.
I'm trained in this kind of rhetoric.
Yeah, totally. He definitely chose his words poorly.
Mm-hmm.
He was messy, maybe even a little offensive in how he said it, but he wasn't hateful. He just made a conversational mistake.
And for that mistake,
he was pounced upon, instantly mocked, and what amplified the terror was the phone. Yeah, one of the students immediately lifted a phone and started recording him, presumably, for public shaming later.
And the consequence was physical.
Immediate and physical. The boy's voice dropped to a whisper. His posture totally changed, his spine literally folded inward, and his thinking, whatever defense he was about to mount, it just stopped completely.
Silence became an act of self-preservation. I mean, that is the massive takeaway here.
It is.
When the penalty for asking the wrong question is to be publicly labeled as unethical, stupid, or evil, then thinking aloud becomes way too dangerous.
Curiosity shuts down.
Yeah.
Conversational mistakes are punished like moral crimes, not corrected as, learning opportunities. The young man learned that the penalty for failure in this structure isn't intellectual.
It's social.
It's social. And if the social consequence includes public shaming via recording, the intellectual game is over before it even starts.
This brings us directly to the core structural critique that was outlined, moving beyond just the rudeness and focusing on the system underneath. It seems the real crime for these students wasn't bad traditions, but just misalignment. Misalignment with their pre-approved framework.
That's absolutely right. For them, the intent behind a custom, the complex history, or even genuine lived experience, none of it mattered.
Only alignment mattered.
Only total alignment with the approved set of opinions. This is why the central thesis is so crucial.
Yeah.
What presents itself as moral progress often functions structurally as moral absolutism.
That's a key distinction. We aren't critiquing the goal of progress, but the means. How do we define that structural absolutism in this context?
Well, if we look at the mechanism, it means replacing ethics with optics.
Ethics with optics.
Yeah. True ethics is hard, messy, context-dependent work. It requires self-reflection, admitting complexity, accepting you might be wrong. It takes time, vulnerability.
And the optic route is much faster.
Infinitely faster. The goal shifts from learning how to be good, which is a lifetime endeavor, to learning how to look good by saying the right words at the right time.
Optics prioritizes immediate external validation.
Totally. You get social rewards likes, approval, membership, and the correct group by delivering the immediate harsh verdict on an issue.
So it's easier to label the old man's memory dangerous conditioning than to actually grapple with the historical complexity of how his community might have benefited from certain customs, even if they were rooted in inequality.
Precisely. The first route is a quick moral win. The second is a complicated intellectual struggle. And the optics game is highly driven by the fear of being labeled an outsider.
So the priority becomes avoiding being corrected or, canceled by the group.
Right, rather than any kind of true moral development. It creates a system where performing certainty is just safer than expressing doubt.
We saw this play out one last time with the older woman's experience, didn't we? She made one final attempt to bring in lived reality.
She did. She was arguing that certain traditions, despite how they look from the outside, had actually given her dignity, stability, and a sense of identity, not oppression.
It was her personal testimony.
Her life experience. And it was immediately dismissed as unaware and brainwashed, simply because it contradicted the approved framework of oppression.
So if your lived reality doesn't match the ideological script, the reality itself is just invalidated. That has to be incredibly isolating.
Deeply isolating. And it leads us right to the structural danger that Rushik identifies, the path to intellectual and social fragility.
Because if you train a generation to view its own culture, its history, its roots, with just pure disdain...
They're incapable of improving it.
Wait, I have to push back on that a bit. Isn't some level of critical disdain necessary to break, entrenched systems of oppression? How do we separate necessary disruption from this moral policing? Where's the line?
That's the critical question. And true effective reform.
Yeah.
It requires immense intimacy and care. You have to understand something deeply to fix its flaws.
Like a surgeon who loves the patient.
That's a great way to put it. You critique the cancer, not the entire body. The approach that was observed on that train teaches distance, disdain, and surgical erasure of the whole thing.
And when you cut those cultural roots out of shame, because you're taught your history is just inherently dirty.
People don't become liberated. They become hollow. They lose the framework for understanding themselves and the world. And that hollowness is often quickly filled by the rigid certainty of the very ideology that demanded the roots be cut in the first place.
That's where the real long-term damage lies.
Exactly.
So what about the mental state of the students themselves, the ones delivering the verdicts? It's easy to feel bad for the victims here, but what does this constant attack mode do to the people enforcing the consensus?
It's a great question. The observation was that constant outrage trains young minds to live in a perpetual state of vigilance, where everything is a potential threat that needs immediate correction.
That sounds exhausting.
It's mentally exhausting and debilitating.
Yeah.
They become accustomed to treating discomfort, the friction of disagreement, not as a necessary part of growth, but as harm. And they treat challenge as trauma.
So when you continually remove intellectual friction, you eliminate resilience.
You become incapable of handling productive disagreement. What disappears is the ability to withstand dissenting viewpoints, and what remains is extreme fragility disguised as moral virtue.
They might genuinely believe they're being courageous by attacking their traditions.
But functionally, they're just enforcing conformity within their own tight-knit group.
It's a profound irony, especially playing out on a Mumbai local. That city was built on loud, messy, passionate arguments. It's a crucible of debate.
And coexistence.
But what was witnessed that morning was loud conformity pretending to be courage. It's the sound of debate being replaced by the sound of a lecture.
That synthesis brings us right to the emotional core of the observations. When he finally stepped off that train, the feeling wasn't anger.
It was grief.
A profound sense of grief.
Grief for the old man, who learned that simply remembering and offering context to his own life is now considered offensive. And grief for the young boy, who learned that thinking aloud and getting it wrong is just too risky to even attempt.
And grief for a culture that is being taught to apologize for its very existence, rather than being taught how to carefully, lovingly, and critically grow from its own roots.
Something to mull over as you navigate your own complex conversations this week. The next time an intense debate starts, just watch the structure of the argument. Is the goal exploration, or is it prosecution?
That leaves us with the final question for you. If we treat every conversational mistake, every poorly chosen word, and every historical blind spot as a moral failing, are we truly liberating minds through sharp critique, or are we, as was feared on that crowded train, quietly policing them into silence for the sake of feeling immediately and absolutely right?
If you found this discussion valuable, we encourage you to pause now and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Also, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you can explore more of Rushik's observations and writing on medium.com/Rushik Rawal. We appreciate you spending this time with us.